Hey everyone, it's Joree. So, as you know, I've been doing a summer of replays with some of the top downloaded podcast episodes. And for the next couple of weeks, they are going to be the episodes that have been about me and my story. And the one that you're about to listen to is probably one of my most absolute favorite stories to share, as it is the single most impactful spiritual event I have had in my life when a light went on and continued to go on. And then it wouldn't go out. And what the meaning was that I took from this very spiritual, very poignant experience. So I hope that you enjoy this conversation. I have telling you guys all about parts of my journey and how I've gotten to where I am. Don't forget, check out the link in the show notes for the Get Unstuck assessment. You can sign up for the Journey Forward Method course, which begins in just a couple of weeks. And we are only a few weeks away from that Marival Women's Retreat if you're still looking to join us. I really hope you enjoy hearing about when my light went on and hope it inspires you to increase awareness for little signs in your life from the universe letting you know you're on the right path. Take care and enjoy the episode.
Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Joree Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Joree is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Joree.
Hi, and welcome back. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and I'm so glad that you did because I'm going to be sharing my most favorite story. This is the story that was the major pivotal turning point in my life that allowed me to journey forward to where I am now. And if it didn't happen to me, I might not have believed it was actually happening. And so even as you're listening, you might wonder, is this really true? But I guarantee you, every word of it is 100% accurate. And it all happened at a time in my life that I was really struggling. I think I may have mentioned in earlier episodes that in my early 30s, I woke up one day and said, how did I get here? I don't remember making the conscious choices to get where I was. I did every next step, and while it was everything I ever wanted, and I created exactly the life that I had dreamt of, and yet something was missing and I was unfulfilled. And experiencing that unfulfillment felt really selfish, and it took me a long time to reconcile that. And I became really open, and I would literally open myself up to the universe and just ask the universe, give me signs, help point me in the right direction, help me understand myself. And that's really where mindfulness came into play in my life. It allowed me to quiet down the chatter in my mind and tune into my body and listen, and most importantly, receive. But the thing that I needed to receive the most was awareness. And at the end of the day, that's what I got. So let me give you some background to lead up to that current pivotal point in my life. So when I was a kid, I was always told that I had the kind of smile that could light up a room. And this idea that I carried light with me was something that showed up multiple times in my life. One of the most significant moments of that was actually during my bat mitzvah service. So for those of you who don't know, during a bar or bat mitzvah, the child is reading a portion of the Torah of that week's story, and they read that in Hebrew, and then they write a speech based on what that story was about and how they can relate the messages of that story into their life and make it something that's personal. So during my bat mitzvah, the story that I read from the Torah portion of that week was about the plague darkness, when the Jews were slaves in Egypt and God had put down the plagues on the Pharaoh to let the Jews be free. And so my story, my portion was about the plague darkness. And my speech that I wrote was about how Jews in general, but specifically in my family, in which there was a lot of tragedy and there was a lot of struggle, that Jews, and specifically my family, there was always the ability to find the light in the dark. And it's that light in the darkness that carries us forward, that we focus on, that we find solace in, knowing that that light is there. So at the end of my speech, the rabbi turns to me in front of the whole congregation, and he says, "It's no surprise that in the middle of your name, Joree, is the Hebrew word for light, which is or, O-R." And it was one of those moments where everyone in the congregation got chills. It just seemed like everything was perfectly aligned, that here I was talking about light, and in the middle of my name, I carry light with me. So fast forward, and I was, again, in my early 30s, and I was in therapy. And I remember one day my therapist telling me, "You're emanating so much light right now," which was actually really confusing because I was in therapy in struggling over my identity and struggling over my marriage, not knowing what to do with my life. So it was really confusing that while I was experiencing this really deep struggle, here I was emanating so much light. And I noted what he had said, and I told him the story of my bat mitzvah. And then a couple weeks later, some girlfriends and I went to Vegas for the weekend for a girls' weekend. And we flew out there and we're walking through the airport. And my girlfriend says to me, "Wow, you are emanating so much light right now. People are just staring at you. You're just attracting a lot of attention." And I had never, ever been someone who attracted a lot of attention. I think partly for so many years, if you listen to last week's episode, I talked about my body, and I had been overweight for so many years, and I didn't have a huge amount of self-confidence, and I had been with my husband at the time since I was 13 years old, so I was never looking for attention and never looking for people to look at me and give me that attention. So the fact that she was telling me that people were looking at me, to me really was not only shocking, but I had a hard time receiving it. And it kind of became this playful joke. And she said, "Yeah, you're emanating this light. It's just attracting energy." So, of course, here is this theme again of me emanating light. So I told her about what my therapist had said. I told her about my bat mitzvah. I told her about what people used to say about my smile when I was a kid. And she says, "Well, here it is again." So one of the nights that we're in Vegas, we were at the Hard Rock Hotel, and it was probably about 3 a.m. And we go into the girls' restroom, and we come out of the restroom. And for some reason, there were all these guys standing outside the women's restroom. I'm wondering if maybe they thought that was a good place to pick up people. I don't know. But all I know is there was like a group of random guys outside the women's restroom. And this guy approached my friends and I, and he said to me, "What's your name?" And I'm not looking to be picked up on, but I was being friendly. And I said, "My name is Joree." And he literally, I can't make this up, he literally said to me, "Hi, my name is Ori. It means Hebrew for light." And I was stunned. I was speechless. And here it was again. And it was just the day after I had just told this story to my friend. So I said, "I need to take a picture with you to prove that you're real because you really just said this to me." We snapped a quick photo and I left. And I'm sure he was like totally confused. So fast forward now a couple weeks later, still struggling in my marriage, not knowing if it's the right fit, not knowing what to do about that because, again, I had created this perfect life. I mean, we really were living the dream. We were that couple that people looked to and looked towards of, yeah, they're the ones to want to emulate. And yet I wasn't happy. And our names had been like one word since I was a teenager. And part of my struggle I was having at this time was I didn't know what my identity was outside of this relationship. And I had this vision, I had this kind of thought come to me that what was happening is I was going through this struggle and this identity crisis and it was a lot of fear. I had a lot of fear of the unknown, of what to do with my life, and, just didn't know how to begin to interact with those thoughts because it was super scary to me. And yet I felt like for the very first time in my life, I was being curious about my own self, who I was outside of being a daughter, which I was very dependent on my mom for many years, to then being a girlfriend and a wife and a mother. And I felt like I didn't know who I was outside of my roles, and specifically in my marriage. And I felt like through this process of me being curious and questioning and struggling with it, that for the first time, and at that point, maybe almost 20 years, it was like our names were beginning to separate, and there was a space being created in between. And this was the vision I had. Like, these names were separating, and there was a space being created in between. This was all energetic, of course. And what was emerging in that space was what I felt was my light. And I felt it was my strength and my confidence and my independence and my sense of self emerging as I energetically was questioning this, not knowing who I was. And so I realized in that moment, I had this awareness, and I realized that my goal in therapy, my goal in the work I was doing was, how do I push those names back together while not squashing my light? Like the vision, if you ever watched Sesame Street as a kid, you know how they would put words up on the screen and they would, kind of push them together to show how a word goes together. And that's what I had in my mind of, I wanted to be able to push our names back together. But I didn't want to squash my light, because this light that I was experiencing was something I never had experienced before. And again, that paradox that at this most difficult, challenging time in my life, at the same time as I was emerging as this sense of self, I was feeling really good. So I wanted to maintain that light, that energy, that sense of self, beginning to be curious about my identity, and not separate the two of us. So I realized that this was my work. So I remember on a Thursday, I go to my therapist and I explain to him, I figured out, this is my goal in therapy. How do I push these names back together without squashing my light? The very next day was a Friday, and it happened to be during Hanukkah, which, for those of you who know what Hanukkah means, it is the festival of lights. And we were having some friends over for dinner, and I was doing a whole big traditional Jewish meal for Hanukkah, and it was Shabbat, and so I was doing lots of cooking. And I remember walking past my bedroom upstairs and noticing, this was Friday afternoon, the day after I had this epiphany. I walked past my bedroom and I noticed that my light on my nightstand was on. Now, I didn't turn it on, and it had never gone on by itself before. And I thought to myself, well, that's weird. So I went and I actually decided to keep it on, that it would be my upstairs light on in the house. And I let it be and didn't really think much of it. So the friends came over, and when they got there, my husband had recently changed the faucet in our kitchen sink, and he was really proud of the handyman work that he had done. So he was showing our friends. And in the midst of showing the handymanship of the new faucet, we discovered that our garbage disposal was leaking, and there was water under the sink. So keep in mind this theme of water, because this was another major theme that comes up at a future point I will share with you guys in another episode. So anyhow, we have this great meal, and our friends leave, and we're cleaning up. And I say to my husband this epiphany that I had. And I said it in really gentle terms of, I had felt this energetic shift, and I wanted to be able to maintain my light while pushing us back together. So he heard me, he understood. And because of the garbage disposal leaking, he had decided that night to sleep downstairs, which we had never, ever, ever before gone to bed separately. And we weren't in a fight, no arguing, no nothing. He decided he was going to sleep downstairs because if the dishwasher flooded as a result of the garbage disposal leaking, he would wake up and protect the kitchen from flooding. So remember I said a moment ago, this theme of water? Well, ironically, a year later, almost exactly to the day, our dishwasher did flood, which was a huge spiritual moment and moment of awareness and divine intervention in its own right. So again, I'll talk about that in a future episode. So the point is, he slept downstairs. I went to bed upstairs by myself for like the first time ever. I go to bed, and a couple hours later, I am woken because the lights are on in my room. And this time, both lights on each nightstand are on. And they were the kind of lights where if you just tapped the bottom, it would go on or off. Like it was just like a touch light. You didn't have to flick a switch. So I thought to myself, that's really weird. And I decided at that point I'd get up. I went to the bathroom. I went downstairs, woke up my husband, said, do you want to come upstairs to sleep? He said, no, I'll stay downstairs. I come back upstairs, I turn off each light, I curl up, roll over to go back to sleep, and sure enough, the light goes back on. Okay, I get up, I tap the light, I roll back over. The light on the other nightstand went on. Now I'm getting a little interested. Okay, I roll over, I turn that one off, I get back cozy again, and the light goes on again. This is the shit I cannot make up. The lights kept going on. I literally sat up in my bed and said out loud to no one in the room but myself and the lights, as I was laughing and crying at the same time. I said out loud, I get it. My light will not go out. And I lied back down. I turned off the light. Sure enough, the rest of the night, the lights kept going on. So finally at around 6 or 6:30 in the morning, and I had gotten like no sleep because I had been wrestling lights all night long, I am awoken because my husband came upstairs and he decided to get into bed. And now I was really curious because if I told him what had happened, he wouldn't believe me. I mean, this had literally never, ever happened before. I knew he wouldn't really believe me, but I was also really curious if the light was going to go on while he was in the room. So I pretended to be asleep because I wasn't really in a deep sleep at all. So sure enough, he gets into bed. At that moment, the lights were off. Within a few minutes, one of the lights goes on. And he obviously noticed and he said to me, wow, what was that? And I said, you don't understand. I've been wrestling lights all night long. I said, the lights keep going on and they will not go out. And knowing what we had talked about earlier, he got it. And he said to me, I'm glad to see they go on while I'm in the room. So we go back to sleep for a little bit. It's now Saturday. We go about our day. We had a friend's birthday party that evening. We got home super late and we're getting into bed. And just as we're about to fall asleep, the light goes on. And at this point, it was only my light, only on my side of the nightstand or my side of the bed. And we decide that sleep was more important at this point. And so I unplugged the light because I didn't want it to go on anymore so we could sleep. And I kept the lamp actually unplugged for a couple of days. I'm not really sure why, but I unplugged it for a couple of days. And when I plugged it back in, I really wasn't certain if it would ever go back on again. And at that point, I had already attributed so much spiritual meaning to it that I was regarding it as a direct sign of the universe. And I wasn't sure what the sign was yet, but it was clearly a sign. So a couple days later, I plugged the light back in, and sure enough, it kept going on. Now, it didn't go on with the same level of regularity or frequency, but it still went on. And a couple weeks go by, and at this point, his nightstand, his didn't go on at all. This was now just mine. So maybe at least once a day, every other day, but enough to know this was still consistently happening. So a few weeks later was winter break, and we were actually going down to Los Angeles on vacation. And I decided to unplug the lamp before we left because I didn't want the light bulb to burn out while we were gone in case it went on. And mind you, this was a difficult time in our marriage. And going away for vacation was actually really good. And I remember thinking at the time, maybe we just needed a change of scenery. Maybe we needed to get out of the same routine and literally get a different point of view to be able to reconnect and enjoy the time with our kids. And we actually had a really, really good time. We were driving back home New Year's Day. It was pretty late. And the closer we got to home, I remember feeling some anxiety bubble up inside of me because I was uncertain whether or not I was going to be able to transfer this connection and the good time we had while being away to being back at home. And I shared this with him. I said, I'm beginning to feel anxious, and he was understanding and very kind about it. So I just needed a little bit of space and how to integrate this transition to being back home. We get back home, get the kids unpacked, get the car unpacked. It's after midnight, go to get into bed, and I plug my lamp back in. And as soon as I plug it in, the light bulb just burns out. And I burst into tears. And I thought, that's it. I'm done. My light is gone. And over the previous 6 weeks, I had attributed so much meaning to this light going on, to my awakening, to my own awareness, to the universe pointing me in a direction that I was supposed to be going. Not sure what that direction was. But as soon as that light bulb burned out, I thought, that's it. It's done. My light is gone. And I felt defeated and I was sad. And we were already in bed, and my husband had said, do you want the light bulb from my lamp? And I said, no, I don't want your light. I want my light. So he went downstairs, got a new light bulb, put it in, and we went to sleep. And I was convinced it was never going to go on again. And I was super sad about it and wasn't really sure what to do about it. So it actually went on. The next day was January 2nd. It actually went on again. And I thought, oh, thank God my light's not done. My light's not gone. However, it did not go on with very much frequency after that. Maybe only 1 or 2 more times over the next handful of months. But another sign of the universe started appearing, which will have to be another episode because I will share that story with you because that is my second most favorite story. But this light was so representative of where I was at in my life, of me being open to the universe, wanting to receive a sign, wanting a reminder I was on the right path. And I used to, at the time, think of it was like this shrine of my awareness. And when it stopped going on, I got really, really sad. And I ultimately realized the universe was sending me different signs. But this theme of my light, and literally the light going on, was such an unexplainable event, but it was so serendipitous. The timing of each individual thing was so impeccable. And my own awareness to be curious of what was arising in my life and how it was manifesting and what was showing up around me. And again, if someone had told me, oh yeah, my light went on and it kept going on right after I had this epiphany about not wanting my light to go out, I would say, yeah, that sounds like kind of bullshit. I'm not sure I believe it, but it's 100% true. So I invite you to think about in your own life, what is your light? What does that mean to you? If you had to relate it back to something in your life that you are afraid could be extinguished, that you are afraid would go out, and what are the signs of the universe that you're open to receiving to help you know if you're on the right path, to help you receive those messages that sometimes we need that divine intervention to show us? What would that be for you? So if you have been journaling or doing any of the meditation as a form of practice from any of these tools, I invite you to think about that. And, I will say my light has not gone out. And in fact, my light shows up in different ways. I get different signs of the universe. I'm very open to receiving those signs, and they continue to show up. And every time any one of them does, it's a reminder to me I'm on the right path. So thanks for listening to my story. Like I said, it is one of my most favorite stories of the path of my life and my light and the importance of my own self emerging and just the serendipity of it all. So again, I invite you to think about, what does light mean to you? What would that be interpreted in your own life? And it's there. I think we all have that within us. And sometimes we don't notice, or we don't pay attention, or we squash it down, or we resist it because it doesn't fit into, or we don't think it fits into what's happening in our life right now. But if there's any reoccurring theme in your life, something the universe is providing to you as a message, I invite you to look at it as the universe asking you, are you paying attention? Are you being aware? Because ultimately, it wasn't just about my light, it was about my own awareness. So tune in another time. I will share about what happened after the light stopped going on, but the universe gave me an even stronger message. So we'll talk about that next time. And just be well. Bye-bye.
To continue your journey forward, find Joree Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat, visit her at joreerose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.